The court is now back in session, and the chamber would like now to cede the floor to Counsel Kung Samon to put questions to the expert. Do you have the floor? Kung Samon, thank you, Mr. President, and good afternoon, Your Honors, and good afternoon, Ms. Elizabeth Becker. I have some questions for you. The first topic is in relation to your book. There is document E3/20. My question to you is the following. What is your knowledge about the Khmer culture, that is the general behavior of Cambodian people? Can you describe it to the court?
Could you be slightly more specific? Behavior of Cambodian people, culture. What do you mean? Living culture, the arts? Do you mean the religious traditions? Do you mean family traditions? There are many aspects of this.
When I refer to culture, that is the way people behaved in a society. So what is your general understanding of a Cambodian culture? I don't refer to any specific aspect of the culture.
Well, my understanding initially was based on my studies at the University of Washington, where I received a degree in South Asian Studies, and that included, of course, your basic intense study of Indian societies, Sanskritized, Pali, and the Indianized states, what's called the Indianized states of Southeast Asia. That would include, of course, Cambodia. Then, after language studies in India, I returned to the University of Washington and did more graduate studies, and including more on the Indianized states of Southeast Asia, the history, the culture. And then I came here as a reporter, and obviously my reporting work enriched my understanding, and I took Khmer language lessons as well.
Thank you. Did you have engaged in any specific study of a Cambodian culture?
Yes, at the University of Washington, as I said. It was required for my major. South Asian studies and Sanskritized countries, that would be essentially the line between Sinicized and Sanskritized cultures is, in fact, the Cambodian-Vietnam border. So as I learned the basic history and faith.
Counsel interrupt. Thank you for your response. What I wanted to hear from you is your specific study on the topic of Cambodian culture. Can you give us some concrete examples on that?
I don't remember the names of the courses I took. I'm sorry. It's been I got my BA in 1969, and then I did my graduate studies in 70, 71. I can't remember all these courses. Sorry.
Thank you. I would like you to refer to the third chapter of your book. Which you talked about the line to treacherous activity, free translation by the interpreter. In that section, you described a folk tale and that you claimed it was a Cambodian folk tale that a woman betrayed her husband and wanted to kill her husband in order to have an affair with another man. And she cheated her husband, so on and so forth. And in your conclusion on that storytelling, and allow me to quote, that is on page 67 to 68 of your book, in English, is 0023 76 72 through 73. In French, 0063 83 44245. Quote, and it is true that a culture with such a folktale is not a folktale that is most light than the name of the country. The lies reflects the cruel acts that were unexplainable, and that it spread over Cambodia during the wartime and during its revolution. And that's the path leading to treacherous activity. Free quote. And I'd like to ask you the following question. When you made such a conclusion, what were the factors or facts concerning Khmer culture that led you to conclude that such a folktale could be used as an example of a path a country is later into?
Thank you. This was an example. I use this to say that Cambodia was not an entirely passive, gentle nation. You're too young, but particularly during the French period, the Khmer were considered gentle, fun-loving, nice people, and the Vietnamese were the tough guys and the ones that you can really count on, and the Lao were lazy. And there were all kinds of prejudices. And when the war started here in 1970, they said, how can this happen? There was all kinds of atrocities committed, so on and so forth. This was a gentle land. They never do this. And so this was a way, and this is, as you notice, this is a Khmer folk tales by Im and Savan Prum, Cambodians. This is a way to say this is not it's not single-mindedly gentle as its reputation, and that's what I was saying. That there are also these other paths in it. It's not the single path. That it's a very complicated culture. It's a very rich, complicated culture, and there is this streak in it. So it's not single-mindedly gentle.
Thank you. Can you also tell the court, were there other folk tales that you think are good examples as good examples to support your conclusion, other than the one folk tales that you mentioned in your book?
The names of other reporters? Is that what you asked? I'm sorry.
Counsel, I refer to other folk tales because in your book you use a folk tales as an example, as a path leading to treacherous activities, and that you refer to that folktale as an example of a Cambodian culture. Can you think of other folktales that you can use as an example in place of the folktale that you use in your book?
Well, in fact, that collection, Khmer Folktales, has many, many other folktales.
My question is rather simple. Of course, there could be other folk tales, Cambodian folk tales, but as an author of the book, did you compare the folk tale that you selected to other folk tales from the collection before you decided to include that in your book?
Yes. Yes, I did.
Thank you. Do you have anything else to add rather than what you said about the Cambodian land is a non-gentle one?
I did not say it was a non-gentle one. I said it was more than, there's more sides to it. Let me repeat. The reason I used that folktale was people were shocked that the gentle land of Cambodia could have people who would commit such atrocities. And so I was trying to say this is a very sophisticated culture with many parts of the culture, and this is not, and just like we, if you know our European history of folktales, we also have folktales that will make your hair stand on end. So this is showing that as in many cultures, you have a broad span of streams of scary things like this. So this was putting Cambodia right where all other cultures are. It's not simply gentle. It's a much more complicated story.
I think your response and the previous response doesn't seem to go together. Can you tell us clearly whether the land of Cambodia was full of violence or cruel acts, or whether you think the land of Cambodia is a gentle one? Please tell us one which is of your opinion.
I did not say it was either or. Cambodia, like all cultures, has a gentle streak, and it also has a violent streak. All cultures are that way. And this was establishing that Cambodia was more than a passive gentle. There are other things. This is not an either or. And as I just said, we have in our European tradition things like the Grimm fairy tales that have similar kinds of scary things. And you have fairy tales, you have Grimm stories, so that it's not either or. I was establishing that Cambodia was more than a single-dimension gentle land, that it was a rich cultural heritage that included violence.
Thank you. Allow me to read the next part of the reading that I just gave it to you. The peasants of the Angkor era lived under the gentle and kind king, and they required to pay a tax through the hardship in order to get the money to build the temple to praise to the god. End of a quote. I read parts of your articles of interest from the book, and that you use excerpts from Chief Kwan, who was a Chinese and who discovered Angkor at the time. My question to you is the following. did you compare that report to other reports done by other researchers on Cambodia, that is, on the sovereignty and the management of the land by other kings, before you included that portion into your book? Or whether you consulted other documents produced by various other experts? President interrupts. Counsel, could you tell the chamber the relevancy of your questions to the facts being tried before this court as part of case 002/02? Because through my understanding, your question is rather far from the facts before us. Could you tell us the reasons behind your line of questioning? Counsel Kong Sam-on. Yes, I'll elaborate further on that, Mr. President. I'd like to question the conclusion of this expert on the political path or line of democratic Cambodia, and she compared it to a folktale about the path through treacherous activity, and that it was linked to Cambodian culture. And what I am trying to do is to put a question to experts that what she read was not part of the main Cambodian culture. President, Madam Expert, you do not need to respond to the last question put to you, as it falls far out of the facts being tried before this court. Counsel Kong Sam-on, allow me to move on with my line of questioning. Also in your book, at in English, 0023 7775, and in French 0063 83 47, and in Khmer 0023 2092. And I'd like to quote a passage from your book. To enhance nationalist credentials, the Vietnamese decided that each of the three Indo-Chinese countries should have its own party and not be grouped together in one regional body. The Lao and Khmer Communists would have their own organizations. If not full-fledged parties, and thereby broadened their appeal within their countries. End of a quote. Madam Expert, the passage that I just read out, can you tell us which source did you rely upon to produce this particular passage?
Could you please give me the page and I can look up the footnote?
It's in your book, and it's page 70 in English.
Thank you. Excuse me. I believe that's from the French Communist Party. I'm not sure. Let me just check the footnote. The closest was Ben Kiernan's PhD, but I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is sort of the standard history from particularly the period when the French Communist Party was so powerful on them, but I'm not sure.
Thank you. And what is your knowledge and understanding of a joint communist country for all the three countries within Indochina? Probably this is also related to the passage that I just read out from your book.
My understanding is that originally the Vietnamese Communist Party under Ho Chi Minh was instructed to be, at some stage, Indochina-wide. And this passage you read was the decision that there would be enough Cambodians and enough Lao that they could have their separate parties.
Can you tell us who made that decision?
If I'm not mistaken, it was the Comintern.
I heard through the translation as it was a Kong Mun Thön. And who is that gentleman, Kong Mun Thön?
Comintern is the old Soviet Comintern. That would be the body that has a say over the This is a long time ago that this happened, and it's, if you remember correctly from the Soviet documents that the other defense lawyer mentioned, there are archival works that show that the Comintern had a very strong interest in how these parties, the Soviet Comintern, how these parties were organized.
Thank you. In relation to the Democratic Cambodia regime, you was a reporter from 1972 to 74, and you returned again in 1978. My question to you is the following. Did you produce reports for your period between 1972 through 1978 in relation to border clashes between Vietnam and Cambodia?
I wrote many articles as a correspondent here, 72 through 74, and in that period there were no border clashes that I covered, no. 72 through 74.
So you didn't write about articles or reports about border clashes? Or were there no border clashes between Vietnamese and Cambodian troops? That is between 1972 to 1974?
At that stage, in this war in Cambodia, as I said, the Vietnamese communist troops in 1970, after the United States invaded Cambodia and attacked the Vietnamese communist sanctuaries, then the Vietnamese Communist Army spread across Cambodia. They were engaged in all of the major battles, 70, 71, 72, and were instrumental in winning Chen La 1 campaign, Chen La 2 campaign, that pretty much brought the Lon Nol army to their knees. So the interest in the Vietnamese army, Communist Army, was as allies of the Khmer Rouge. And of course, the Vietnamese Communist Army was fighting the Khmer Republic Army. So that was the Khmer Vietnam fight, and that was the battle here in Cambodia.
And I'd like to ask you further questions regarding the Khmer Rouge Army and the Vietnamese Army. Did the incursion of Vietnamese troops into Cambodian territory, in particular during in the liberated zone, were those troops, Vietnamese troops, invited by the Democratic Cambodia armies, or were there any other reasons behind their entry into Cambodia?
As far as I know, and as far as was made public, they were allies.
You talked about allies. Were they always allies? And there were no conflict between the two forces? Can you elaborate a little bit further?
As I said, in 1974, I wrote a lengthy piece called Who Are the Khmer Rouge? In that piece, I identified Salat Sar as the head of the Khmer Rouge, and I pointed out that according to the information that I had gathered, there's tension between the Vietnamese communists and the Cambodian communists. And that was an unusual piece of information, and many people doubted it. But was that a border clash, a big border clash? No, I just knew that, and particularly, again, I relied quite heavily on the work Regrets of the Khmer Soul by It Sarin to describe these tensions between the Vietnamese communists and the Cambodian communists.
Thank you. On the border issues, and you have stated at some length about that, at least on three different occasions, that the invasion by the Vietnamese troops into Cambodia was not of a humanitarian nature, but it was due to border conflict. Do you still stand by your conclusion on this particular issue?
Yes.
Defense Counsel, thank you. Do you report on, or do you know about the reporting information on the agreement to recognize the border between the resistance movement, including the United Front of Cambodia and the Vietnamese army?
No.
Defense Counsel, thank you. During 1976 through to 1978 or early 1979, did you receive any information on the attack, on the fighting at the border between DK Army and the Vietnamese Army?
Yes, there was a lot of reporting on that.
Defense Counsel, are you yourself covered and reported about this attack or war?
I was not in Vietnam then, and I did not get a visa to Democratic Kampuchea until 1978. So and I was a correspondent for the Washington Post in Washington. So my information was what I read from other reporters and from different information services.
Counsel, thank you. Now come back to my question on the purpose of the creation of Indochina Party for the three countries in Indochina. Can you elaborate for the court on this matter?
The original Indochina Party, this was when the original, as I remember, Ho Chi Minh wanted a Vietnam Communist Party, and he was talked into an Indochina Communist Party, and then it later divided into Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam.
Counsel, thank you. I would like to ask further that what was the view or the idea of creation of the Indochina Party was later giving up, or it was also furtherance to move on into the future?
The original view was that there was French Indochina. And so the view was the strongest movement was in Vietnam, but it might as well be Indo-Chinese because the French governed largely Indochina.
Counsel, you did not respond to my question saying what was the policy or the initiative to establish the Indochina Party was postponed, or was there any effort to continue to form and operate later in the next decade or so?
I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question. I thought you were talking about the original view. So you have the Indo-Chinese Communist Party, and it continues. You have the separate parties. I'm not sure what you want me to add.
Defense Counsel, I would like you to indicate the idea of forming Indochina Party was abundant, or the idea within the three countries was still there that they wishes to form the Indochina Party. In case of abundant, when was it happen?
Okay, and I believe you. Are you referring to the during the war, the American War? After the American, say, 65 to 75, there was very much a united front kind of Indochina. So you'd see posters with Vietnamese communists, Cambodian communists, Lao communists, and so there was. I wouldn't call it a party, but there was definitely the message getting across was that these three communist parties were fighting the Americans together, and they were united against American imperialism. And I believe there was at least one, if not two, conferences on this, and there was an Indo-Chinese United Front.
Counsel, I did not receive the response, but I would like to move on. Talking about the fighting between DK Army and Vietnamese Army during 1976 until 1929, you told earlier to the court about the border conflicts. Why the two countries who were the allies, why they did not proceed with the negotiation to solve the problem? Why did they took the war as a solution at the time?
Because they could not agree on the border, apparently, because Democratic Kampuchea believed that the Vietnamese were trying to undermine them. I will gladly refer to Nyan Chunda's very good dissection of this in his book, Brother Enemy. He was a witness here.
Counsel, Madam Expert, you gave the argument that the DK regime was fearful of become weaker. Can you explain the use of the army force to fight against the Vietnamese army along the border? So why was it weak in terms of the peaceful negotiation? So could you elaborate a bit further for the court?
Well, one of the reasons that DK's army was weak was, in fact, they'd had several purges that did weaken the army.
Counsel, I don't understand your answer. I'm talking about the negotiation to finish the conflict on the border, and you said that it weakened the situation, and you said that the weakness was because of the purge within DK. I don't understand the relationship in your response. Could you explain me further?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question.
President, Counsel, could you please make your question clearer and be more specific so that it is well understood by the expert? Counsel, yes, thank you, Mr. President. It might be because of language issues. My question is as follows. Why the DK regime did not solve the problem with Vietnam during the 1970s, but they use the arm or the weapon to solve the problem? And then the expert responded to me that because DK was weak, DK was fearful that it will be weak. And I think why it was a kind of fearful, because there was an opportunity to have a peaceful negotiation. So, Madam Expert, can you respond and tell the court about this?
As I understand your question, and I'm going to repeat it to make sure I do understand, please. You are asking me, why did Democratic Kampuchea not solve the problem with Vietnam in the 1970s peacefully? Why did Democratic Kampuchea turn to a military solution? Is that correct?
President, please hold on.
That is the big question, isn't it? That is a major question. Why did the Khmer Rouge, Democratic Kampuchea, seek a military solution? And as I said earlier, I think they confused the basic state-to-state border issues, power issues, with the purges within the country that weakened the country, weakened the military, and backed themselves into a corner.
Defense Counsel, I don't understand at this point. Could you elaborate further? In a case where DK army was weak, you said that it related to the internal purge. Is this the reason why the DK not to continue a war with Vietnam unless DK had a powerful army, and then it can start a war with the military measure? So can you explain these points?
That is a very good question, and I think it's a conundrum. I don't know if it's easily explained.
President, Counsel, could you please move on? Counsel, thank you, Mr. President. I would like to ask you further on the negotiations between Democratic Cambodia and Vietnam during DK era. My question is that did you receive or did you cover and report any political negotiation on the two issues happened between the two countries?
On the border question, you're referring to the border question, yes?
Counsel, other issues other than the border?
As I said, in that period, I lived in Washington, D.C. I was not in Vietnam or Cambodia, and any meetings between Vietnam and Cambodia did not take place in the United States, so no.
Defense Counsel, my question is not for the period or the time when you were there, and later on, did you conduct any research on those kind of negotiation?
Yes.
Counsel, did you find any problem in the diplomatic or other problem that were major for the two countries to be solved?
There are many problems between Cambodia and Vietnam. And there was the one the times when I could talk to them was when both the Vietnamese and the Cambodians were at the United Nations. And at those points, you could talk to them and you would certainly get some handouts. But often the problems were disguised in rather terse, difficult to understand handouts. But as I said earlier, by 1977, they were making it clear that they were having serious issues. And you just reminded me of something. The first time, during the I'll call it the American War period, that border issues came up between Vietnam and China when, I believe it was 1974, when China, during one of Vietnam's big offensives towards the south, the Vietnamese communists, the Chinese took the Paracels Islands. And that was a signal to a lot of people who know Vietnam better than I do, that border issues and maritime issues were going to come back to life at the end of the American War, and it's still the case today.
Different Council, thank you. And I would like to consult your documents, page 202, ERN in English, 0023, 7907 in French, 0063, 84, 68. I would like to quote by reading. Those who were among the famous of the three ghosts who only kills upon the most famous of the three ghosts continue to rise. He behaved for the Khmer Rouge as he had for Prince Sihanouk. Whatever job he was given him, he accepted and performed to the best of his ability, apparently accepting the strategy and the consequence. He had been an effective cabinet minister for Prince Norodom Sihanouk. He was just so as the nominal head of state for Pol Pot. End of quote. I would like to ask you that did you know any other information about Mr. Khieu Samphan and your note saying that he was the nominal head of state in my quote?
Khieu Samphan, of course, as you read in my material on Khieu Samphan, you read in the previous ones, that when he was in the cabinet for then Prince Sihanouk, he did so well that people were actually wondering why he was doing so well, and then of course he fled. And then when he was the head of GRUNC, he was the liaison between Sihanouk and what became the DK leadership. And then under DK, he was the face of the regime. So that's what I'm talking about.
Counsel, could you explain clearer when you say he was the face of DK? So what do you mean by that?
During the war and the resistance, two people were known as the leader of the Khmer Rouge, Prince Sihanouk in Beijing and Khieu Samphan. When you look at the Grunk material, Khieu Samphan is the face, and then you have the other two ghosts, but it's Khieu Samphan, Prince Sihanouk. Then under DK, no longer Prince Sihanouk, as you know, and he resigns. And Khieu Samphan is the head of state, and he takes foreign trips as head of state. He meets delegations as head of state.
The microphone of the council was not activated. Council, you said that the foreign trip by Mr. Khieu Samphan as the head of state, and he met with other head of states. Is this your testimony a while ago?
No. He met with delegations in Cambodia, but he did travel. And he's one of the few DK leaders who are allowed to travel outside of the country.
Council expert, could you be more specific? But I would like you to confirm your terms as the three ghosts. Can you explain the meaning of these words?
In the 1960s, Khieu Samphan had a very high reputation as an intellectual, as a liberal politician, not corrupt, good writer, starting the newspaper L'Observateur, and two other leftists in Phnom Penh with good reputations were Hu Yun and Hu Nim. When the war began in 1970, and after the first years, there was a strong desire on some parts to start negotiations for peace. Son Son, who was mentioned earlier, came to Cambodia to try to make some deal between Lon Nol and Prince Sihanouk. The Americans blocked that. Later, there was an attempt, a more significant attempt, because the Lon Nol army was losing. At that stage, it was said that the three ghosts were dead, that Khieu Samphan, Hu Yun, and Hu Nim were ghosts. They weren't alive. And that's where the name came from, that they were ghosts, that they were dead. And therefore, it was impossible to reach a peace accord.
Council, thank you. In response to my earlier question, you said that Khieu Samphan made a foreign trip. Do you know when he made that visit during DK? Or you don't have this kind of date for his travel?
Well, if I remember correctly, he went to Spain during DK. Well, yeah, it was Spain, wasn't it? You can ask him. Spain. During Democratic Kampuchea, I believe. I could be wrong, but that's what sticks in my mind.
Council, was there any other country that he visited, or just Spain?
I can't remember, I'm sorry.
Counsel, expert, could you please indicate clearly when during DK era, but I would like to know when specifically.
I'm afraid I can't remember exact year, sorry.
Counsel, so who gave you this information? Can you tell the court, based on your testimony, that Khieu Samphan went to Spain during the DK regime?
If I remember correctly, I think it's from FIBIS, Foreign Broadcast Information. I could be wrong.
Did you have any further information regarding his visit? For instance, whom he go with, what's the purpose of his overseas trip?
I'm afraid it's too long ago. I don't remember.
Thank you. Also, in your book, I'd like to discuss with you a word that you use, and that you actually use it frequently. That is the word macham in Khmer, or the word center. Because you use very frequently the word macham in Khmer, or the word center. What do you mean when you refer to the center?
The top national leadership.
Can't you explain to the court the administrative structure of the Communist Party of Cambodia?
I'm sorry, but in a few minutes, no, I can't.
Counsel, thank you. And Mr. President, I do not have any further question. President, thank you, Counsel. Today's proceedings come to an end, and we will adjourn today's proceeding now and resume tomorrow, that is Thursday the 12th of February 2015, commencing from 9 o'clock in the morning. And tomorrow we will hear a testimony of a civil party by pseudonym through TCCP 303. And the Chamber is grateful to Ms. Elizabeth Becker for your valuable time and for a very long overseas trip to provide a testimony before this court as an expert in the last few days. And your testimony can contribute to ascertaining the truth in the case of 002/02. And now your testimony has come to an end, and you may be excused from the court. And the Chamber wishes you a great and safe journey back home. And court officer, in collaboration with the WISU, please assist the arrangement of the transportation of the expert and security guards on Saturday to take the two accused, Nunchi and Khieu Samphan, back to the detention facility and have them return to participate in the proceedings tomorrow morning before 9 o'clock. The court is now adjourned.